Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: UN backs creation of Palestinian state without Hamas. China's economy slumps as deflation problem spreads to region. Jihadists kill 127 people in Niger. Ethiopia opens Africa's largest hydroelectric dam, and AI can predict who will go blind. Starting with politics, Nepal appoints new leader after deadly protests. Former Chief Justice Sushila Karki is interim Prime Minister as the army imposed a curfew and sought to restore order after violent protests killed at least 51 people and injured more than 1,300. Additionally, more than 12,000 prisoners escaped during the chaos, and some are trying to reach India. More than 100,000 in anti-immigration protest in London. The demonstration was organised by the anti-immigrant and anti-Islam activist Tommy Robinson. Britain's biggest anti-immigrant political party, Reform UK, which has topped opinion polls in recent months, has kept its distance from Robinson, who has several criminal convictions and has served at least 5 prison sentences. Calls for suspension of EU trade with Israel. European Commission President von der Leyen, in her most extended condemnation yet of the Israeli government, described Europe's inability to agree on a response to Gaza as painful and stated the EU executive would freeze its bilateral support for Israel, apart from funds for civil society groups and the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Center. The Commission would also table proposals to suspend the trade parts of the EU-Israel Association Agreement and draft sanctions against Israeli extremist ministers and violent settlers in the West Bank. Macron chooses Lecornu as next French Prime Minister. After François Bayrou lost a confidence vote over his spending plans to break the deadlock over the nation's debt crisis, the French president tapped Armed Forces Minister Sébastien Lecornu as the country's next prime minister, as a block everything anti-government protest against the planned budget cuts saw hundreds arrested. Pacific leaders reaffirm support for Taiwan to attend regional forum. It comes despite a push from China to exclude Taiwan from the Pacific Islands Forum. Beijing has been pressing Pacific Islands nations to strip Taiwan of its status as a development partner and to annul a 1992 agreement that allows it to meet with its remaining Pacific allies at the annual gathering. Moving to stories in conflict, UN backs creation of Palestinian state without Hamas. The UN General Assembly voted in favor of a resolution by France and Saudi Arabia that seeks to recognize a Palestinian state without Hamas involvement. The resolution included that Hamas surrender its weapons, free all hostages, and is excluded from leadership in Gaza. Jihadists kill 127 people in Niger. Gunmen carried out a series of attacks, including a mass murder at a mosque, where more than 70 worshippers were shot dead during prayers, Human Rights Watch said. The attacks are a major blow to the credibility of Niger's military junta, as it promised to curb the insurgency when it took power after deposing President Bazoum in 2023. Romania and Poland report Russian drones. Romania says a Russian drone has breached its airspace, the second NATO country to report such an incursion. Romanian fighter jets were in the air monitoring a Russian attack in Ukraine and were able to track the drone near Ukraine's southern border, although it said the drone had not flown over populated areas and had not posed a risk to the population's safety. Earlier, Poland said it had shot down at least 3 Russian drones which had entered its airspace. As PM Tusk told Parliament, it was the closest we have been to open conflict since World War II, although he also said he had no reason to believe we're on the brink of war. Australia and Papua New Guinea to totally integrate military. The treaty will allow Australia to recruit soldiers from Papua New Guinea and vice versa, as well as provide a pathway for Papua New Guineans to gain Australian citizenship by serving in the Australian Defence Force. Australia will also invest $8 billion over the next 10 years to transform a shipyard in Western Australia into a nuclear submarine service facility. The moves come during a time of increasing geostrategic competition in the region between China, Australia, and the US. Iran and IAEA sign agreement amid growing tensions. The International Atomic Energy Agency agreement paves the way for resuming cooperation, including on ways of relaunching inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities. The meeting came at a sensitive time as France, Germany, and the UK began the process of reimposing sanctions on Iran over what they have deemed non-compliance with a 2015 agreement. US struck another alleged Venezuelan drug vessel, killing 3. It was the second such strike against a suspected drug boat in recent weeks. President Trump said that it occurred in international waters, but provided no evidence for his assertion that the alleged Venezuelan drug cartel vessel was carrying drugs. Here's the latest in economics. China's economy slumps as its deflation problem spreads. China's factory output and retail sales reported their weakest growth since last year in August, keeping pressure on Beijing to roll out more stimulus to fend off a sharp slowdown in the world's second-largest economy. China's deflation problem is now beginning to spread throughout the region. Thailand is experiencing deflation, the Philippines is not far off, and even India's consumer prices have slowed to just 1.6% per annum. UK and US in nuclear energy deal. The landmark agreement, coinciding with US President Trump's visit, is aimed at accelerating the development of nuclear power, generating thousands of jobs and strengthening Britain's energy and security. Nasdaq to make it harder for small Chinese companies to list. As part of proposed changes, companies operating primarily in China will need to raise at least $25 million in initial public offerings to list on the exchange. In 2024, 35 small China-based companies listed in New York, roughly twice the 17 US-based microcap listings. Microcaps typically refer to stocks with market capitalizations of between $50 million and $300 million. US economy facing difficult position. Consumer prices increased 2.9% in August from a year earlier, up from 2.7% the previous month, and the biggest jump since January. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core prices rose 3.1%, the same as in July. Both figures are above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. This puts it in a difficult spot as it prepares to cut interest rates. UK economy saw zero growth in July. The failure of the economy to grow amid the biggest contraction in manufacturing output for a year has added to investor concerns. A global bond market mini meltdown also brought the yield on the UK's 30-year gilt up to a level not seen since 1998, also hitting the British pound and adding to the Treasury's fiscal headache ahead of the autumn budget, with the national deficit hitting 4.8% in 2024, as well as the country's debt of around 96% of the GDP. Now for news in development. 1 in 10 children worldwide obese, says new UN report. Obesity surpassed underweight as the more prevalent form of malnutrition this year, affecting 1 in 10, or 188 million, school-aged children and adolescents, and placing them at risk of life-threatening disease, UNICEF warned. Ethiopia opens Africa's largest hydroelectric dam. It is designed to hold 74 billion cubic meters of water and is expected to produce more than 5,000 megawatts of power, doubling Ethiopia's overall electricity generation capacity. But it is also the basis of an intense three-way dispute with Sudan and Egypt and has been deemed a threat to the livelihoods of more than 100 million people. Court rules Europe can call nuclear and natural gas sustainable investments for green transition. The ruling could drive large amounts of financing toward projects that are not widely considered green. Austria had sued the European Commission and the bloc's executive over the inclusion of gas and nuclear in the EU's classification system for environmentally sustainable economic activities. Rwanda and DRC in revamp of mineral sector. The African nations will commit to working with third parties, including the US, to revamp their mineral supply chains and develop reforms, according to a draft of an economic framework, as they seek to spur investment following a peace deal reached in Washington. The framework comes after the countries signed a deal in June which aims to end fighting that has killed thousands and attract billions of dollars of Western investment to a region rich in tantalum, gold, cobalt, copper, and lithium. Illegal gold mining fuels mercury boom in Mexico, poisoning people and environment. Rising gold prices and global efforts to ban mercury mining are driving up the price of the toxic metal to all-time highs. While the demand for mercury, key for illegal gold mining, triggers a mining rush in central Mexico, sustaining thousands of miners and their families, it also exposes them and the fragile environment to mercury poisoning. Mexican mercury is also fueling illegal gold mining in the Amazon, contaminating large areas. Finally, our social news. New study. We're not witnessing a sixth mass extinction event. While the decline in biodiversity is real, the rates aren't anywhere near approaching a mass extinction, a phenomenon typically defined by the loss of 75% of all species over a geological interval of time. The study in journal PLOS Biology argues recent extinctions of plant and animal groups are rare and often confined to island habitats. What's more, rates of extinction may be decelerating, in part due to intensifying conservation efforts. Albania appoints world's first AI-made minister. The virtual minister, made of pixels and code and powered by artificial intelligence, is named Diela, meaning sunshine in Albanian, and she will be responsible for all public procurement, Prime Minister Rama said. During the summer, Rama mused that one day the country could have a digital minister and even an AI prime minister. But few thought that day would come around so quickly. China announces new nature reserve on contested Scarborough Shoal. The disputed shoal is in the middle of a strategic area of the South China Sea. The Philippines has reacted strongly to plans for the reserve in what is internationally recognized as its exclusive economic zone. US halts funds for global HIV/AIDS programs. The full extent of the budget cuts is unclear, and Congress is still battling the White House's proposed budget clawbacks and withholding of billions of dollars in funding. PEPFAR, formerly called the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, is credited with saving more than 26 million lives over the past 2 decades and preventing millions of HIV infections, particularly in Africa. AI can predict who will go blind years before doctors. Researchers trained AI on tens of thousands of eye scans, enabling doctors to predict which patients need early treatment to preserve their eyesight and which can be safely monitored, cutting down on unnecessary procedures while preventing vision loss. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.